The following is a presentation of The Day.
Welcome to our debate for the Salem 1st Selectman race, the third and final debate The Day is hosting this year. My name is Erica Moser, and I'm a reporter and member of the editorial board here at The Day, moderating this debate in the absence of our recently retired editorial page editor, Paul Chaunier. Taking part in today's debate is Republican candidate Ed Chimalewski and Democratic candidate Hugh Mckinney, who both sit on the Board of Selectmen. Under our debate format, the candidate responding to a question will have 1 minute to answer, the opponent gets 90 seconds to respond, and the candidate who initially answered the question will get 30 seconds to rebut, and we may give a little bit more time if there's some follow-up needed for some of the questions. Our timekeeper is Carlos Virgen, Assistant Managing Editor for Audience Development at The Day, and he will hold up a sign alerting the candidates when they have 15 seconds left. We are going to be using a combination of questions both from us here at The Day, along with some that readers have submitted to us, and some questions that are a bit of a combination of both. We will alternate between which candidate answers each question first, and we will begin with 1 minute opening statements, starting with Mr. Chimalewski.
Well, thank you for inviting us both to The Day so we can talk to our constituents. My name is Ed Chmielewski, and I'm running for first selectman in the town of Salem because I believe I've got the training experience to be a successful first selectman. My wife and I, Susan, moved into Salem over 20 years ago. We were blessed to raise two boys in Salem. I'm happy to say both of them are teachers. My wife, Susan, is a special education teacher, and she's since retired out of district. The Salem School and the East Lyme High School have been very, very good to our children. Kevin Lyden's been our first selectman for 12 years. I've been fortunate enough to be a selectman for 8 years and the acting first selectman for since 2018. So I look forward to transitioning into the role of the first selectman and serving the town well, based on my training experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney?
Yes. Thank you very much for having us for this debate. I think the voters in Salem are really asking for it to say, tell us about these two folks. Hello, my name is Hugh Mckinney, and I'm running for first selectman here in Salem. I've been a resident of Salem for over 25 years. I'm a retired nuclear engineer and spent a lot of my career at Millstone Nuclear Power Station. I want to be your first selectman. Not for me, it's not a burning desire to climb a ladder. It's a desire to give back to the town. This town has been very, very good to me. My wife and I, Robin, have raised our kids here, and since I retired a few years ago, I want to give back to the town as much as possible. And I think I have the qualifications and skills to be a good selectman.
Thank you. Our first question, we will start with Mr. McKenney. Salem is set to receive more than $1 million in American Rescue Plan funding across this year and next. How would you like to see the town spend the money? And you have 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I believe that we need to set up a process as opposed to just willy-nilly going and picking projects. What I'd like to see, and other municipalities have done something like this, is getting input from the townspeople as to what they think we should be using those monies for. And then from that point, working with possibly an ad hoc committee to make those final decisions, and then bringing it to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen for a final decision. I would like to see some of that, in my opinion, possibly go to helping our volunteers who have been workhorses during this pandemic. And I think we also need to be looking at how we can possibly use that money into water management for the town. And I don't mean sewerage, I mean wastewaters to protect our inland and wetlands.
Thank you. Mr. Chimalewski, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you for that. And I know my opponent and I have talked about that on the Board of Selectmen. And so we're going to receive over $600,000 on two occasions, it's my understanding, for almost $1.2 million. We've got to use that money wisely and carefully. Have we seen around the state, some municipalities, some leaders have used that inappropriately, or some of the money, and they're getting dinged on that. So we don't want that to happen. My thought is that we should form a committee of our community that represents the community, possibly Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning, Economic Development, the Rec Commission, our volunteer firefighters, our emergency management team, and members of the community at large, to discuss how that money is spent. In addition, we might be able to use it for broadband infrastructure, a fiber optic infrastructure, cable that are businesses that we could tie into economic development in the near future. But I think that's a decision that has to come from our community members at large.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney, you have 30 seconds to respond.
No, I think that Ed has very much answered the question appropriately in my mind, and I would support any of those issues going forward.
Okay. Our next question, we're starting with Mr. Chimalewski. Do you support using the town's unassigned fund balance to fund budget requests from the Board of Education? Why or why not?
No, I want to start by saying that I wholeheartedly support the Board of Education. I was fortunate enough, in Salem, we're the town of volunteers, and I volunteered for the PTO. And I was an officer. I was elected as an officer. I then gravitated and was asked to run for the Board of Education. I served on the Board of Education for 8 years. My wife is a teacher, as I said. My children are teachers, and we know that if teachers are happy, children are happy. That being said, by using that money for the Board of Education in that capacity, it's almost like a mortgage on your house when you have the balloon payment afterwards, that it's not sustainable. So I wouldn't support doing that. I would support a robust discussion between the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Selectmen to have a smoother budget process than we've seen in the past. And I think with our new superintendent, we're gonna see that, and with our chair and officers of the Board of Education, I think we're gonna see that. Thanks for the question.
Mr. McKenney, you have 90 seconds.
My answer to this is yes, I would support using some of the undesignated funds to support the school budget. People need to remember that it's a cyclic process, and at the end of the fiscal year, the school and the town governments put money back into that undesignated fund. And because of that, over the last several years, the undesignated fund became actually too high. And the auditor said, look, you're too high. You need to spend it down. It also penalized us because when the state was looking at reducing ECS funding, they looked at our undesignated funds accounts and said, these guys can take a hit. And we did, much more than other people, quite frankly. So it's a two-edged sword, and you've got to balance it out. There are times that we need to use those funds to support the Board of Education to a limit. Right now, it's over, the account is high, riding very high, and we need to get it down to the mid-range and maybe a little lower mid-range, quite frankly, because I support education 100% in town. Education's important to me. It's something that was instilled in me from when I was a kid. My late wife was a teacher. Our kids went through the Salem school system, did great. I want to make sure that school system stays strong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chimalewski, you have 30 seconds to respond.
My opponent and I, both agree wholeheartedly that we support the education, we support the school, and it's been good for our families. I had the honor and privilege to serve with your late wife on the Board of Education, and she was just an awesome board member. But we differ. I do disagree on this point with my opponent, and again, to use that funding that is going to be like a balloon balance, and it's just not fiscally responsible. It also impacts our bond rating, and we just lived through this COVID unexpected expenditures. So I would not support that for the reasons stated, and I think it will affect our bond rating down the road.
Okay. I had a couple quick follow-up questions on that, so I'm going to give you both 60 seconds more, starting with Mr. Chimalewski. Two things you had said. One, you talked about wanting to have a robust discussion, to have a smoother budget process. So I was just wondering, what have been some of the hiccups and hurdles in the past, and how would you fix that? And then secondly, your opponent talked about, being penalized for having an unassigned fund balance that's too high. So what's your response to that as well?
Those are good follow-up questions. And what I could tell you is, through my experience, I was fortunate enough for the last almost year and a half to be the Board of Selectmen liaison to emergency management. And we recall going back a couple of years, 2-3 years, that the budget process was very, very painful. One of the things I did was I took the parties, I took the chiefs and the deputy chiefs, I met with members of the Board of Finance, and I met with my opponent and members of the Board of Selectmen to enhance communication, streamline communication, and share information sometimes sooner than the budget process. So when it came to emergency services and fire, this past budget process was very smooth, seamless, and cordial. And as first selectman, I would do the same thing with the Board of Education. I know many of the members of the Board of Education, and I could work very well with them. I met with the superintendent, the principal, and the vice principal the other day to try to actually start that transition. So thank you for the question.
Mr. McKenney?
So what would I do differently to help streamline the process of budgeting on a yearly basis? Last year, we had, as we've had in the past, some significant friction between the Board of Education and the Board of Finance. We had many, many people on Zoom meetings at a public hearing testify in support of the budget that the school board had presented. The Board of Finance ignored those inputs, and it was very inappropriate for them to do so, quite frankly, especially during a public hearing. The Board of Finance is supposed to listen to what people are saying and act upon it and use it as evidence when they weigh their decisions. So one of the things I would like to do, and if I am a first selectman, I'm be the ex officio member on all the boards, I would be pushing very hard to get additional training for the Board of Finance so that they understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Thank you.
Moving on to our next topic, and this question we're starting with Mr. McKenney. Paid firefighters are barred from also serving as volunteers, and the Gardner Lake Volunteer Fire Company sued the town seeking to recover funds they say were needed to run the ambulance service when paid personnel aren't on duty. Is there anything you would have done differently than the current first selectman leading up to the filing of this lawsuit, and is there anything you think the town can do differently going forward to keep legal fees down? And you have 60 seconds.
I probably would have been a little more open in communication between the town government and its citizens to keep them apprised of what was happening. What I would do in the future, that some of those things are rarely covered under our discussions during executive session, and I'm not at liberty to discuss that. I apologize if that's not answering the question to people's satisfaction, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to break the confidence that was shared in that executive session.
Mr.
Great
Chmielewski?
question, and we are, our hands are tied, both of our hands are tied to really get into detail with this. But what I can say is that about a year and a half ago, as the acting first selectman, I identified a need to assist our first selectman in this process. At that time, there was a lot on the plate of the first selectman, with managing different departments and things. With my training and experience and background as a police supervisor, as a supervisor with the judicial branch, and as a career military officer, a lieutenant colonel of Connecticut Army National Guard, and I'm a retired Army major for retirement purposes, I identified the need the ability to jump in and be the liaison to emergency services. What I then did was I met within a couple of weeks with the chiefs and the deputy chiefs of the Gardner Lake and the Salem Fire Department, along with town hall staff and with our director. And we enhanced the lines of communication immediately. Since then, we've been meeting on a monthly basis. The chiefs have our direct contact, mine and Mike Bednar's, who is the emergency services director. So we've enhanced that that communication. The chiefs and the deputy chiefs have the ability to call me 24/7 as the liaison if there's an issue or a problem. And what I tell them is, if you have an issue, come up with a solution. If I can do it over, if I was to go back in time, I think that we had a period for a year where we did not have a chief representative from the Gardner Lake Fire Department or a deputy chief representative. And that's the time that the lawsuit came about. I would have ensured that we had a command officer in the meetings at the town hall, and that would have resolved the lawsuit, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney, you have 30 seconds.
I don't believe that having another line official of the Gardner Lake Company in the meetings with Ms. Chimalewski would have stopped any kind of lawsuit. The Gardner Lake Company, the officers of the organization were very concerned, and there would be no discussions. This issue really had to go in front of a judicial branch as opposed to being successful in negotiating. We just couldn't do that.
And if I may just, so that there was
I'll
some
give you both 30
flexibility.
more seconds.
Yeah. So thank you for the 30 seconds. And there's really two issues here. One is that, according to the Norwich Bulletin, I think the day reported on it, it was Gardner Lake Fire Department sues town over stipend payments for volunteers. The other big component of this was federal labor law, where we had full-time staff, full-time firefighters, one that usually came from each house, that were paid. As a result of Connecticut labor law and the Waterford case, they were no longer able to volunteer their services. So what we said is, if you come out, we're going to pay you. And the part of the lawsuit is that they wanted the individual to still be able to volunteer. And it's labor law. We can't fight labor law. Thank you.
Give you another 30 seconds as well.
No, I don't think I have a whole bunch to add, to tell you the truth. We need to work collaboratively going forward, and the new administration will resolve the issues, be it Mr. Chmielewski or myself, but I'm very confident that we will reach an agreement that both satisfies Gardner Lake and our fiduciary responsibilities to the residents of Salem. Thank you.
And I wanted to ask as well, not just about the lawsuit, but the emergency services agreement. Both of you voted last September to terminate the emergency services agreement with Gardner Lake. And this question is starting with Mr. Chimalewski. Where does the process of developing a new contract stand now, and how do you intend to work with Gardner Lake going forward?
That's a great question, and what I can say is that we are moving forward, we are discussing it, we are negotiating it. As a matter of fact, we just recently signed a new agreement, and we increased the stipends for volunteer firefighters who are working shifts on the ambulance from what I recall is about $50,000 to $75,000. In addition, what we have done with emergency services and fire is we've enhanced fire service during this COVID time, during this the past year. We hired an additional second firefighter, which backfilled the firefighter that retired. We've also hired more part-time firefighters to cover the shifts. There's times during the day now that we have 3 firefighters on duty. Our full-time firefighters and part-time firefighters are covering 50% of the calls, approximately, according to the emergency services director. So we are moving forward. We are enhancing services for the betterment of the town, working closely together with both fire departments. Thank you. And I went over, so I'd certainly be happy to give my opponent a couple more seconds.
Mr. McKenney, you have 90 seconds or 95 or whatever to respond.
Thank you.
What I have asked both chiefs earlier privately, that if I am lucky enough to be elected for a selectman, I'd like to sit down and speak to them directly and understand all the concerns that the line officers have regarding these issues, but more importantly, to understand what their concerns are for all of our emergency services. And then what I want to do is to bring people together with a negotiating committee that would be comprised of one of the first selectmen and another first selectman, so that we could work in a collaborative fashion to put together the final agreement that we need on emergency services. And I know that we can. I think that having new faces in the negotiating room will change the outcome dramatically, quite frankly. And I think that's a good thing. And That's how I intend to go about resolving this issue. We have to learn to compromise. This country is always at loggerheads between the two extremes. We need to relearn how to compromise. And, quite frankly, this may be one of those areas where we need to get into compromising mode.
Thank you. Mr. Chmielewski, you have 30 seconds.
So, Hugh, I love the word compromise, and in Salem, we have compromised. I think we've worked well together, and this is the first time in 14 years or so that we've had a race, an open race. Bob Ross was our selectman, first selectman. He won handily, and then Kevin has been the selectman for 12 years. So we do, and based on my skill set, my training experience, and my proven track record of success as the president of the PTA, president of the seniors, as a liaison to emergency services, I'm able to enhance communication, and that's a strength of mine, and bring people together to work to move forward for the betterment of the town of Salem for all of our residents. Thank you.
And our next question, we're starting with Mr. McKenney. This is a question that a reader sent us. Would you change or reverse any of the current First Selectman's decisions? And I guess on other topics than Gardner Lake, since we just talked about that.
I would be looking at some of the decisions that were made and look at them very carefully, and there would be some that I probably change over. There is a bridge that was erected on our property, town property, that in my mind may not have been properly gone through the regulatory process and approval process. That's something I would look at very carefully. I would be looking at implementing new ideas. I want to look at how we can have a discussion in town to bring in new revenue to help with our budget issues. I want to put solar facilities around the town to get money from Eversource. It's a viable process. I've looked into it, and I think it's a great idea. I also want to look at possibly getting people together to discuss a rebate for senior citizens on their property taxes, and we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Mr. Chimalewski, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. And, I certainly agree with my opponent's thought of giving back to the seniors. There's nothing. Our seniors help build the town of Salem, and we owe everything to them. So I think I'm sorry, please repeat the question.
Sorry, yes,
I
because
got sidetracked with
back to there.
agreeing with you,
would you
compromising.
Would you change or reverse any of the current First Selectmen's decisions?
Thanks for that. And Kevin Lyden's been the first selectman for 12 years. For the last 5 years, he's been the CEO of the town of Salem. He's kept our budget flat. He's helped working with the Board of Finance and all the other boards and towns. He's enhanced services. We together, I've been blessed to work as the acting first selectman since 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and 2021. I think that he's done a wonderful job. I wish he would run again. He's not. He's decided to retire. But when he decided to retire, I asked him if he would consider running for the Board of Selectmen, as Bob Ross did for him. So when Kevin took over as first selectman, Bob Ross came in and became a selectman. I've asked him to do the same thing. What I might do differently would have been add more information on the situation with emergency services, the work that Mike Bednarz and myself were doing meeting with the firefighters in our town, Salem, and notifying the public in that way. But I think Kevin has done a great job, and I'm happy to have served with him. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McKenney, you have 30 seconds.
I think this is a good point that really does show the differences between the two candidates. Kevin and I didn't agree on everything. I was a minority of one on the Board of Selectmen, and there were times that issues that I had didn't necessarily get adequate discussion or consideration. So, quite frankly, I think that this is the line of demarcation. A vote for Mr. Chmielewski is a continuation of Kevin Lyden's policies. I want to do things differently. I want to make Salem be prepared for the future instead of living on a budget cycle. all that we do is go from budget to budget to budget to budget. That's not solving our problems, quite frankly.
I have one follow-up. I want to give both of you. I'm going to give both of you 60 seconds here. The one thing I wanted to start off following up with, Mr. McKenney, you said there were some issues that you thought didn't get adequate discussion. What are some examples of some of those issues you think didn't get adequate discussion?
Well, I was a big proponent working with the school board to putting solar panels on our roof at school. But there were people within the town who didn't like that idea, and Kevin didn't really want to discuss it anymore. I tried to speak to him about these projects that I've been looking at, and he didn't want to get involved in those, quite frankly. And that, I think, set us back a few years, quite frankly. The Board of Education was saying, please put solar on our roof so we can get some additional funds, be it just enough to pay for our electricity to help the town with budget. Or what I want to do is to put up solar canopies in the back of the school, and we'll make significant profit from Eversource. I guess I'd have to say I'm a candidate of change as opposed to let's keep doing what we're doing for the last 12 years.
Mr. Chimalewski, your response?
There is our difference. If we look back at the last 5 years, we've had fiscal success, we've shown great fiscal responsibility, and we've enhanced our services. We've kept our town safe. We've fully funded the Board of Education, the school. The budget has increased every year. We've been creative. We've taken things off the plate of the Board of Education. When it comes to solar on the school roof, haven't been on the board for 8 years. With the hodgepodge of buildings that make Salem school, the roof is not a candidate for solar. It leaks like a sieve, and we had mold problems in the past. I was in the room with my opponent, with First Selectman Leiden, and Hugh talked about solar initiatives about a year and a half, but we haven't seen any. I think we all support solar. We all support enhanced income into the town, but we haven't had a plan of action. And I'm the candidate that has a proven track record of success and leadership in many venues in town.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question, and we'll start with Mr. Chimalewski on this one. What are some ideas you have for improving communication and transparency with town residents?
Well, that's a very good question, and what I like to think that I lead by example. So one of the things that I've done to enhance communication with our town residents is I'm involved in everything. I'm the president of the Salem Seniors. I am a mentor for the Boy Scouts. I'm a former chair of the Boy Scouts in town. I'm the chairman of economic development. I'm the acting first selectman. I've been a selectman for 8 years. I was on the board of ed for 8 years. I was on the PTO. So I'm embedded into every aspect of Salem life. I'm in the Lions. I'm a former past president of the Salem Veterans Lions. So to enhance communication, what I do is I listen to my constituents. What I would do is bring the boards together, as I have done. I have a proven track record of bringing the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the fire departments together as the last budget season showed. And I would enhance communication using various tools like the Our Town Salem and other things to communicate with the town and more meetings. Thank you.
And Mr. McKenney, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I cannot more strongly disagree with my opponent on this. He mentioned that he's embedded in all these different things. Well, that's sometimes half of the problems, is that he's embedded in so many things. He's got so many pokers in the fire. He's not able to follow through on his commitments. And that's not me speaking. Who that comes from? I am knocking doors in the town of Salem, and I've got about 75-80% of the doors where I've talked to people, and they want to hear what's happening in town. What I would like to do, to answer the question directly, is to start a newsletter in some form or fashion called Salem Today, where information can go out. It's almost like the Wednesday folder in the school environment that we have here in town. For years, there was a Wednesday folder. The kids would bring it home physically, show their parents. Now it's all done electronically. What a great idea. I want to take that concept and build it into a daily process. Here's what's happening in town on any given day. The people that I talk to in town are dying for information. They're hungry. What's happening in town? And that would be one of the tools that I would use to make sure people understand, hey, there's a Board of Education meeting. They're talking about this. There's a P&Z meeting. You need to worry about this. The school's doing this.
Thank you.
Get out that information that way.
So I've got to respond because unfortunately...
Well, you have 30 seconds, yes.
Unfortunately, my opponent just went negative, and that's a shame. So follow through, and my product is in economic development. We've produced brochures of all the businesses in town. As the liaison to military affairs, I've been the chairman of the Memorial Day Parade. As the seniors president, we've met, we've got agendas, we've got our seniors through COVID. As the selectman liaison to emergency services, we've brought the fire departments together. We're meeting, we're communicating, we're working on training together. We've got a proven track record of success. So I've never heard, that's really a first for me, to hear that you're involved in too much. As the Board of Education, on the Board of Education, I served our children. On the PTO, I served our children. And what I've done is dovetailed all my experiences together. For example, and I just have to finish up with this because Hugh did go negative, as the military liaison for military affairs and ran the Memorial Day Parade, I selected the chief and the deputy chief of each fire department, who were former military officers, to walk together when there was the controversy, to walk down the Main Street in Salem during the parade. I've dovetailed things where the seniors have supported and gave gift cards to the firefighters. So it's called unity of effort, and it's called unity of command, Hugh. Thank you.
Since you went over, would you like another 30 seconds to
I
respond?
need more than 30 seconds, please. I think I've been more than patient with the amount of time he's gone over. Let's talk about the EDC booklet that you just put out. Prominently in the book is a picture of Mr. Chimalewski with the Salem seniors. Now, it's listed as he's the president of the Salem seniors. What does that have to do with economic development? Mr. Chmielewski, you use your positions to promote yourself all the time. Speaking about the Memorial Day Parade, your introductory speeches to those two fire chiefs were each twice as long as what the fire chiefs had to say. You have always been a self-promoter, and regarding your time on the Board of Education, I know from the chairman of the Board of Education that you didn't attend all the meetings. In fact, you attended maybe half of the meetings. And you had a personal agenda for attending those meetings. So I hear the things that you're saying, Ed, and it's important that I feed back what the residents of the town have told me when I go and knock doors.
Once again, Hugh,
I'll give
you're gonna go,
30 more seconds each, and then we need to move on.
It really is a shame that you've gone negative. And I'm almost speechless. So, in politics, what you do is you promote yourself and then you knock down your opponent. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're promoting yourself. You really haven't done an awful lot, but you're throwing stones at me based on what I've done. I'm respectful to what you've done. I think it's very, very disrespectful, and it does show the difference between the two of us. I like to think that the glass is half full, that we have worked together. I didn't bring up the fact that at 2 selectmen meetings recently, one was talking about the COVID money coming in, that you
We're
weren't
at time
there.
now. We'll give 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to further topics.
Ed, these are things that people are telling me as I walk the streets. You need to understand that. This is not me talking. This is what people tell me. You want to call it going negative? That's fine. I'm just telling you, this is what I'm getting from feedback from our citizens.
So I'm showing
sorry.
my experience.
I've given everyone more time here, so we need to
Not an argument.
we need to move on to the next question. And everyone, you can have a chance in any questions to talk about, what you have done and what people are saying.
Summary, yeah.
So to move on to our next question, we'll start with Mr. McKenney on this one. And 60 seconds, you get 90 seconds to respond. 30 seconds, please try and be mindful of the time here. one thing that's come up a lot in Salem, being a small town, is the topic of regionalization. You know, with a population of only 4,213, Salem is, you know, the kind of small town that comes up in these discussions of regionalization, whether it's at the state level, at the local level. What are some services you'd like to see merged either within town or with surrounding towns, and what are some services that you really don't think should be regionalized? And you have 60 seconds.
And I'm first?
You're first, and then you have 90 from Mr. Chmielewski.
Okay. What I'd like to do is work with the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments to look at the initiatives that they've got going on and how we can integrate into those regional issues. Right now, we're part of Ledge Light Health District, and I think that's a great regionalization process. We were one of the first schools to actually put a contract together with East Lyme to regionalize our high school students. We need to build upon that. Quite frankly, in many ways, East Lyme, although the demographics are different, we need to be working more and more closely with East Lyme. We are the same 37th House District, and I think that we need to continue to work in sharing some resources with them. We need to look at the regionalization that we have with emergency services and continue to build upon those relationships that we have with the other towns.
Thank you. Mr. Chimalewski, you have 90 seconds.
And I agree with what my opponent said. You know, we're working very closely with our state representative, Holly Cheeseman, our state senator, Paul Formica. Holly represents Salem and East Lyme. The example given of our high school students, our Salem school students going to East Lyme High School, is a wonderful example of collaboratively working together with another town. That's been that's been a success story for many, many years. And I think it'll continue to be a success story. When it comes to regionalization, we've regionalized our health services through the Southeastern Council of Governments. We're continuing to learn how we could work closely together. I think down the road you may see regionalized fire service. We're getting less volunteers, not more volunteers, not only for our volunteer firefighters, but in scouting and coaching and in other things. So we do have to look forward. We're using the Connecticut State Police rather than at one point Salem had its own police officer or constable. So we've gone to the state police, and that's a great deal. We've got 2 resident troopers that keep us safe while we're sleeping. We've got right now we've got great volunteer fire departments. We've got great full-time fire departments, but it's always important to collaborate and network with our local towns and governments, our local first selectmen and mayors, and the Council of Governments to see what we can do, how we can do more with less.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have 30 seconds, Mr. McKenney.
I think the key really is what Mr. Chmielewski said at the very end, is our Council of Governments. We need, if I am lucky enough to be elected first selectman, that's what I want to be doing, to talk to the other executives of the region. We need, how can we pull these things together to help with our budgets? Because we all have budget constraints, and that's the key. And we need to get beyond lip service, and we need to get into actions. And I'll work to make that happen.
Thank you. Our next question, we're starting with Mr. Chimalewski. The 2020 census showed that the population of Salem grew only 1% over the past decade compared to 8% in 2010 and 17% in 2000. Do you see this as an issue? And if so, what would you do to attract more people to Salem? And you have 60 seconds.
Well, I don't know if we need to attract more people to Salem. If you look at the housing market, and our son just bought a house in Salem, a house is listed and it's sold within a short period of time. We've just brought in more senior housing as the president of the Salem Seniors, the chairman of economic development, as well as a board of selectmen representative. I've worked hard to bring in senior housing. We've got 48 units coming in on Route 82. So when I look at my service, not only as in law enforcement, in the military, but in volunteerism, I've got a lot of products to show for it. I was very instrumental in bringing in the senior housing. We're going to have 48 units. It's going to provide a whole lot of tax revenue. And as a matter of fact, my understanding is the waiting list is already full for that senior housing.
Thank you. You have 90 seconds, Mr. McKenney.
And the question is, how long are we going to, how are we going to
so
bring more people
the
in?
question was, with the census showing population grew 1% over the past decade, which is a smaller amount than previous census results. Do you see this as an issue? And if so, what would you do to attract more people to Salem?
Actually, I don't think it's an issue, quite frankly. The town's going to grow with population-wise, those as a function of outside influences in terms of what's happening at Electric Boat and other industrial facilities. We need to be prepared for that influx, and that's why I want to be looking at how we can get a good plan of conservation and development out the door. It's due next year, and my discussions I've had with planning and zoning indicate that the draft is not really where it needs to be right now, and we need to work hard to get that plan of conservation and development updated and be prepared for these things. And one of the things I hope to do if I am elected for a selectman is, as an ad hoc member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, is to work with them to implement a better draft and a better POCD than we currently have right now to address these issues.
You have 30 seconds to respond.
So I think the plan of conservation and development is very, very important. And what I can say is if elected and blessed by the town of Salem and its citizens to be your first selectman, I will also work on the plan of conservation and development. But I have a proven track record of success and products in town and in everything I've done, and a successful leadership. So I would champion this as ex officio, and we would have a great plan of conservation development.
And I am going to get back to the plan of conservation and development in a little bit, but first I did want to talk a bit more about housing, because you had brought that up as well about housing development, and obviously that's an issue now. The houses flying off the market. There's not really enough housing, and so this question we're starting with Mr. McKenney. What would you do to spur more housing development in Salem, in particular affordable housing and housing for seniors, and then also how do you balance that with land conservation issues?
I recently testified in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the affordable housing plan. Our town planner has worked diligently to come up with a plan that we can use as an attachment into the Plan of Conservation and Development's revision for 2022. That plan has got specific elements that are key to making this happen, and part of it is partnering with other organizations regionally that would be working to find lots that could be made into affordable housing, and encouraging regulation changes that would allow more in-law homes and secondary homes to be built on properties, people's properties, so that stock could be used as affordable housing. All those things are really very good, important things that we need to do to bring in affordable housing into our town.
Thank you. And Mr. Chimalewski, you have 90 seconds to respond.
When it comes to affordable housing, there is some confusion out there, because the state's definition of affordable housing, you have to meet certain requirements and criterias. We have rentals in town that would meet the financial number of affordable housing, but they're just not affordable housing based on infrastructure and other things in that statewide definition of affordable housing. That being said, I do agree with my opponent in that we do need more housing. We've got the 48 units coming in; they're booked solid. We've got several condos, but I think two-family housing would be very helpful to the town. Duplexes. What we've done in Town Hall. And as the acting first selectman, I'm in town hall all the time working with our town hall staff and employees. It's a very user-friendly environment. The town hall staff are community service oriented. So when someone comes in with a problem, under Kevin's leadership and under my leadership, it's like, how can we resolve this based on guidance from the state, based on regulations, based on zoning, and et cetera. So we want to also maintain the rural character of Salem. That's very, very important. We love our town. It's a beautiful town. We're blessed to live in the town, and we have to be very environmentally friendly as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney, you have 30 seconds.
I agree with Mr. Chmielewski that the staff at the town hall is fantastic. But what I'm hearing from people that I talk to on the streets is that they're very frustrated with the level of services. And Ed has said several times we've increased the services. Well, we really haven't. We have a lot of part-time people who are very part-time, building inspectors and WEOs, ZOs, and those enforcement officers that are very difficult to get a hold of. So I want to change that. I want to look at how we can make that more robust. And if it requires bringing more people on part-time, maybe we need to do that.
Thank you.
If I just make just a comment that I like
30
your,
seconds each one.
the comment of making it more robust. My thought is to also enhance communication, enhance services, making the town hall staff more available and robust, but working, thinking outside the box to do that via communication, online forms, posting things online so individuals could post their burn permit or whatever. So that's the way I would tackle it. And then if we need to increase hours, we certainly would do that.
Thank you. I'll give you 30 more seconds, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I truly think we need to. Your suggestions are strong suggestions, but I also know that so many people in town are frustrated with the unavailability of some of our folks, and that needs to get fixed. And so I feel very strongly that if we're able to bring solar power in and make money, I think we're going to do very good bringing more funds into town that's going to help alleviate these squeezes.
And moving on to our next question, and this one is for Mr. Chimalewski first with 30 seconds. With the legalization of recreational marijuana, cities and towns across Connecticut are grappling with whether and where they want cannabis establishments. In a recent referendum, for example, Stonington residents voted against prohibiting cannabis establishments while Preston put in place a moratorium, and the Old Line Zoning Commission voted to ban marijuana establishments. Other options that municipalities could do would be banning them citywide, banning them in certain areas, allowing them, doing nothing. Which of these options do you support and why?
So that is a great question. And in my various capacities, as a leader, I've had to make decisions. My thought on this issue is it really is a town decision, and that I would encourage vigorous discussion, vigorous debate, and town meeting, and it may even be a committee of town residents to look into this. I would assume it's going to come under planning and zoning to look at. But whatever the town's wishes in this regard would be, I would support. I don't think it's the role of a selectman or the first selectman to, based on any background experiences or whatever, to steer an issue away from the wishes of the town people. So I would bring it to the town, and whatever the wishes of our residents would like to do, I would support.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney, you have 90 seconds.
I think Mr. Chmielewski is absolutely right. This is the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, quite frankly. And they need to have some type of public comment, public input on potential regulation change that would allow it, or maybe not allow it. And I'm a firm believer in listening to what the people have to say at public hearing, because you need to use that as evidence as you weigh your decisions that affect the town, quite frankly. But we can't have people speaking in public hearings saying, that ain't ever going to happen, who are associated with planning and zoning. That sets yourself up for liability issues, where if someone wanted to, they could take the town to court by saying, look, this individual is already predispositioned to not allowing this to happen. These are the issues First Selectman needs to deal with. One of the important things that Kevin has had to do, and all First Selectmen do, is deal with liability issues to the town. Because if you ever want to see a budget explode and our undesignated fund evaporate, well, you go to court, you make a mistake in town, someone says something that's libelous, and the town could get sued for a significant amount of damages. And that's one of the things I'm worried about, as if I'm lucky enough to be First Selectman. That's a concern that I have. We need to make sure that that all the committees follow their roles and responsibilities. And as First Selectman, I'm going to work to get training for all the commissions and committees and the boards so they understand what they can say in public hearing and what they shouldn't say.
You have 40 seconds to respond since you went over a bit. 30 to 40.
I think that we've covered, this very well. I'll use a little bit of my time just to say that, going back to a previous question, and that I've used my positions to communicate with the town. For example, as the president of the Salem Seniors, my name is on and my phone number, my personal phone number is on the town calendar, so seniors can call me, and we've had several seniors call to sign up for the Salem Seniors. We've given food to over 55 people through COVID, 55 families. My opponent was involved in that. I managed that for the first selectman over the last year. So it's important to communicate. The ad that he spoke of also is an advertisement for people to join the Salem Seniors. So there's a resource for our valued, beloved seniors who will help build Salem.
Thank you. Our next question, as promised, I said I'd get back to the Plan of Conservation and Development. We're starting with Mr. McKenney on this question. So as you know, and as you mentioned, the Planning and Zoning Commission is working on developing the 2022 Plan of Conservation and Development, a 10-year plan. You mentioned affordable housing, but other than that, what else would you like to see included in this plan? And what have you done in the past to help the town meet the goals of the last Plan of Conservation and Development?
I thank you for asking that question. In 2012, I was the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I authored, along with several other hardworking people, the POCD. When I became a member of the Board of Selectmen, one of the first things that I did was I lobbied the first selectman to put on the agenda, let's look at the status of the action items that were in the Plan of Conservation and Development. So we did that. And each action that's in the POCD had a committee or people responsible for implementing those recommendations or deciding we weren't going to do those recommendations. Up until then, that was 2018, there was no real significant oversight of POCD from 2012. So I feel that I was the one who was pushing, where are we with POCD in 2018, and we got some things done.
Mr. Chimalewski, you have 90 seconds to respond.
So the Plan of Conservation Development really is a roadmap for Salem's future, and our Planning and Zoning Commission, under the chairmanship of Vern Smith, is working very hard. It's a great group consisting of Republicans, Democrats, and I think there's some unaffiliated candidates. They're working well together. They work really, really closely together. I think that all of the boards and commissions are currently also looking at that. I know on economic development, Carl Fontenot, who was a previous town planner for the town of Salem, is a member of economic development, and he's also a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I asked Carl to join economic development so he could be that catalyst between planning and zoning and economic development, two very, very important things. And Carl is working on the planning and the economic development portion, and we've been talking about it at our meetings, and we hope to have an actual product. We will have a product for the Planning and Zoning Commission to insert into their book. The Planning and Zoning Commission has reached out to the Historical Society. I'm the vice president of the Salem Historical Society, and I know that Walt Volberg, who's a member of P&Z, has reached out to L.B. Burr, who's the president, and there's been great discussion there. So it's a town product. We're asking all the boards and commissions to contribute to this roadmap for the future.
Thank you. Mr. McKenney, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Here's where I want to point out differences between the two candidates here. I worked on the Plan of Conservation and Development. I shepherded it through all the approval processes in 2012. I'm a workhorse. I'm not a show horse. I'm here to work for the people of Salem, not to say I'm going to do all these things that other people do. I'm actually doing the work. And POCD is very important to me. And that's why in 2018 I was pushing, where are we with it?
Thank you. And we have one final question left before we get into closing statements. So this one we're going to start with Mr. Chimalewski for 60 seconds. This is something we touched on earlier, was solar energy. So if elected first selectman, what role do you think the first selectman should play in promoting solar energy and other alternative energy sources? And what past experience do you have in these areas of energy efficiency and alternative energy?
Well, solar energy and alternative energy is very, very important, and I believe that we should have a committee that's going to look at this. I know that my opponent has a year and a half ago said that he was going to look at it and come up with some solutions, but we have to also embrace the rural character of Salem. I think that 30 acres of a solar farm wouldn't be appropriate. I know when I moved into Salem, I wondered why in my neighborhood there weren't any streetlights, and the realtor told me 20-something years ago, well, folks in Salem value the night sky. And so we value our rural character, so we have to be careful that we don't have windmills or solar, that are ruining the environment. That being said, it is very important. And I think that through our various boards and organizations, that we should look at this. I think my opponent has a good background in it. But, for example, on the Salem school roof, that's just not the place for it. If you're going to put a solar farm in behind the school somewhere and pipe it in, that would be a great solution, but not on the school roof.
Mr. McKenney, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So in my career as a nuclear engineer at Millstone, I was heavily involved with the efficiency of the plant and how we maximize the efficiency of the plant while keeping it safe. So I know quite a bit about this. I actually have solar panels on my roof, and I recently invested in some Tesla batteries. Now I'm selling power back to Eversource and making money on that. The town can do that too. For the folks who are worried about putting farms all over the place and destroying rural character, I can understand their concerns, and they're important concerns. But the projects I've been looking at are built on asphalted parking lots. Those parking lots already have the infrastructure and the design to handle the runoff that occurs when rainstorms, by definition, because that's how they were designed. We could put a facility behind the school, and it's perfect location because Route 85 has got the three-phase power that can handle the load. The transfer station is another good place that could be utilized. In fact, the study I reviewed was that there were 11 different sites that were identified from Yukon that we could put solar on those asphalted areas. And I also do want to have conversations and see if people are interested in doing possibly a solar on some cornfield right now. It would be, it's proposed to be over at the Gadboy's property next to the pavilion. And we could put a 4.6 megawatt station there, and the town would make a significant amount of revenue on that. It's not being currently used now. We don't make any money on it. We should be looking at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give you a minute to respond since you went a little over.
If I was to hire a project manager to manage alternative energy in town, I'd hire you. You have a great background in that, and you have a lot of experience in alternative energy and solar. But as the first selectman, we have to run the town and govern the town. A little known fact is the first selectman is the police chief. I'm a former member of the International Police Chiefs Association. I was a chief probation officer with the Connecticut Judicial Branch. I was a retired police sergeant here in New London and a shift commander running the city police department, police and fire, on evenings when the actual lieutenant wasn't there. I'm a career military officer. I was a major, and I was a logistics officer for the 169 Leadership Regiment. I worked for the University of New Haven. I was a college instructor and a mentor, helping college students get jobs. So there's a lot that comes under the purview of the first selectman, and I think that I have the requisite skills, background, experience, proven track record, and proven products to successfully lead the town into the future.
Thank you. And we'll get into our 1 minute closing statements here, starting with Mr. McKenney. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm a volunteer in town. I volunteer for all kinds of things. I was planning and zoning chair for many years, selectman. On the board of trustees for the TVCCA. I'm on the Southeastern Connecticut Water Authority Resource Board. I volunteer at the Mitchell Farm Equine Retirement Home, taking care of horses. I really am a workhorse, and I want to be the town's workhorse because it's not about me, it's about you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chimalewski, you have 1 minute.
I love the town of Salem. This town of Salem was good to my wife and I and to our children. We hope to retire in Salem, and we hope to raise our grandchildren in Salem. That's why it's very, very important to me to work with all boards and commissions, work with the town, so we could have an excellent school, and we do have an excellent school to enhance that. I believe that I've got a proven track record of success and product as running the Memorial Day Parade, putting out, as my opponent has said, the economic development services and directory booklet, chairing the bicentennial committee. That was a year and a half. We had a great bicentennial year. So I've got a proven track record of success, training, and leadership that'll help us move forward for the next 2 years to have a stable town government.
Thank you. Well, thank you both so much for joining us for this spirited and lively debate today. Thank you. And to anyone watching, thank you for tuning in and watching this debate. The election is on November 2nd, and you can follow the day's election coverage at theday.com/election2021.
Please get out and vote.